As my old friend David Korn wrote today, this would be a good time for Donald Trump to release his Chinese tax returns. What? You don't have to pay taxes in China? What? You don't pay more in taxes in China than you do in the US? What? You don't have a Chinese bank account? And what? You don't have plans to sell military 5G bandwidth to Peter Thiel and Republican fat cats in a no-bid contract? What? You don't have such campaign finance trouble that you have to do the debate because you can't afford any advertising time? What? You don't have such a limited brain capacity that the only things you accuse your political rivals of are things you yourself are profoundly guilty of? While Trump was explaining to his crowds at the latest Bund rally that the pandemic is now ending and he plans to get Biden about China in the debate, China fell off the top shelf of his closet and hit him squarely in his head. 3 separate financial scandals are suddenly engulfing Trump simultaneously in what has to be, even with his history of corruption and self-dealing, some kind of record. An explanation of each and the implications they present in a moment. But first, that truly rarest of Trump stories, one in which he has actually told the truth. Last Thursday, he explained to supporters that he was doing a town hall with the hated fake news because, quote, I figured, what the hell, we get a free hour on television. This was literally true. It also explains why, after insisting he would not do Thursday's debate if moderators could cut off his microphone, and then caving on that, and then insisting he would not do Thursday's debate if the topics were not replaced by 90 minutes only on foreign policy, and then caving on that, Trump is showing up as ordered by the debate commission. Trump and his allies raised $1.5 billion just since the beginning of last year. But according to its official filings with the Federal Election Commission, as of the end of September, Trump's re-election committee had only $63,100,000 left, half of what is left in the Biden coffers. 43 days ago, per Dave Weigel, Trump ruminated about putting up to $100 million of his own money into his campaign, presumably writing a check on his Chinese account, his Chinese checking account. He didn't do it, and unlike almost all his other investment decisions, this appears to have been a good one. One historian says this is the worst-run presidential re-election campaign in history. And the old McCain consultant Mike Murphy said you could literally have 10 monkeys with flamethrowers go after the money and they wouldn't have burned through it as stupidly. There is, of course, every chance Trump's campaign had 10 monkeys with flamethrowers. I mean, have you seen that video of the arrest of Brad Parscale? You saw that, haven't you? So Trump did the town hall and now has to do tomorrow's debate and doing multiple rallies a night until the election because the only real advertising resource he has left is him. But the premise of the debate was clearly for Trump to go after Joe Biden and his son on China. Ukraine didn't stick and the Rudy Giuliani laptop repair company crap didn't stick. So tomorrow's 90 minutes of free television was supposed to be Trump's chance to connect Biden and China. And one of the key sells was Biden's son had opened a bank account with Chinese businessmen. So the debate from Trump's vantage point was to just keep repeating Biden and China and Biden and China and Biden and China and COVID and Biden and China and COVID and Biden and COVID and Biden and COVID. Instead, the latest chapter of the Trump taxes torture from the New York Times is about Trump and China, and what's the headline? Trump has a secret bank account in China, and a Trump organization lawyer has confirmed this on the record. And Trump paid $188,000 in taxes to the Chinese Communist government between 2013 and 2015, which would be about $187,000 in taxes more than he paid to the American government. Apart from the actual fact of the Trump-China scandal, the revelations in the Times mean that if Trump goes for the supposed Biden-China connection in the debate, Biden only has to mention Trump's bank account in China, or his tax bill in China, or just for good measure, the 3 floors of Trump Tower he had rented to China's biggest state-controlled bank. And like the disaster of your overpacked closet after the financial box of Christmas ornaments had fallen on Trump, and after the financial bowling ball had fallen on Trump, the closet shelf then fell on Trump. CNN reported that since last month, the White House has been pressuring the Pentagon and the FCC and even some Republican congressmen to fast-track selling off the best parts of the U.S. military's bandwidth spectrum in a no-bid deal to a company that wants to dominate the 5G wireless market. That company is bankrolled by the infamous Trump financier Peter Thiel. One of its investors is the Bush conman Karl Rove, and Rove is the company's top lobbyist. And the guy Rove has been lobbying is Trump's chief of staff, Trump's lead deputy at the moment, Mark Meadows. This is exactly what you cannot have 2 weeks before an election. Your chief of staff seen as influence peddling to sell off U.S. Army bandwidth to a 5G developer on a no-bid deal pushed by Karl Rove. Of course, you also can't have 2 weeks before an election a Chinese tax return and a Chinese bank account. And of course, you also can't have half the money your opponent can use to buy TV time in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. Talk about your 10 monkeys with flamethrowers. One of them's running for president. And on the subject of OPM, the acronym used by my business school friends of 40 years ago for other people's money, Trump had a monopoly rich guy with his empty pockets hanging out kind of day today. Chief of Staff Meadows, the influence peddler on the 5G deal, says the infamous Trump drug discount cards can't possibly be sent out before Election Day. And Trump is apparently being stopped by Republican senators from making a deal on a COVID-19 stimulus package plan before Election Day, although that could change. In short, Trump cannot even get buying votes done correctly. And to top it all off, somebody in the Trump campaign has been complaining about stool size. A New York Post reporter, questioned by Sean Hannity about last week's town hall, began her Trump apology speech by saying that the whole thing was a fix from the start because to sit on, NBC had given Trump, quote, a tiny little plastic stool that could barely fit half a buttock, let alone a whole one. They write themselves sometimes. Trump, half-assed. Okay. Thank you. Much more seriously as we start the headlines of the day. By now you've heard of the latest results from that nightmare from the diseased mind of one Stephen Miller, who has been an anti-Hispanic lunatic since his days in high school. That is from people who went to high school with him. The concentration camps that were opened in your name and mine for people trying to come into this country, principally from Latin American countries, are still ruining lives and still destroying this country's reputation internationally, to say nothing of probably sending Stephen Miller to hell. In a court filing, the ACLU says the government's first program of this psychological torture on the tired, the poor, the huddled masses yearning to breathe free separated parents from about 1,000 kids. The parents were then deported. The kids stayed in the cages. When a judge ordered that the families be reached, notified, and reunited because this country used to be run by human beings, the lawyers were only able to find a parent or two for about 500 of those 1,000 or so kids. As of today, 545 children, most of them very young still, are now in the care, if that is the right word for it, of this incompetent, inhuman government. They are, for all practical purposes, now orphans. Stephen Miller, Nosferatu, should go to prison for the rest of his life, and his Stalag commandants need to go with him. Headline number 2. Sinclair Television's Eric Bolling, who is such a sleaze that even Fox News fired him for being sleazy, if you can imagine there is such an equation that results that way, asked Trump in a sit-down interview, with COVID, is there anything that you think you could have done differently if you had a mulligan or a do-over on one aspect of the way you handled? What would it be? Trump's reply was 2 words. Not much. 220,000 indictments for negligent homicide, or worse. And lastly, for the humorous relief that we all need so desperately, the British newspaper The Guardian reports that the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, is unexpectedly seen, and I mean seen, in the sequel to Borat. A series of London and British tabloids now have this image. Let's see it, shall we? The former New York mayor, current personal attorney to Donald Trump, is seen reaching into his trousers and apparently touching his genitals while reclining on a bed in the presence of the actor playing Borat's daughter, who was posing as a TV journalist. If you have problems with such things, that's the actor on the right, and that's Giuliani on the bed. At this point in this scene, Sacha Baron Cohen bursts in and says to Rudy about the woman, quote, "She's 15. She's too old for you." I want to say just one last thing, and then you can bring me back on camera. Thank God it's low definition. Anyway, think of it this way. This won't be the first time Rudy Giuliani bet big, but then it turned out all he had in his hand was his laptop. Good night and good luck.